Hello, my lovely anatomists. Thank you so much for joining me. Our video for today, this is our last video on the lymphatic system. So we're going to dig a little deeper into those lymphatic organs, which include lymph nodes, the thymus, and the spleen. So let's get started. All right, y'all, we are looking here at a lymph node. And the thing that makes a lymph node different from a lymphatic nodule is that it is surrounded by a fibrous capsule. So that's what we're seeing here as this darker green structure. And so this is a more distinct, more organized structure than those lymphatic nodules. Now, the job of the lymph node is to remove 99% of antigens. Antigens, remember, are going to be those markers that we see to recognize cells that are foreign. So another way of saying this is, oh, we're removing 99% pathogens. Now, what we're going to see, remember, we saw these collections of lymph nodes on that original diagram in the first video. We see these positioned throughout the body, especially in locations where pathogens might have gained access. So again, we see quite a lot in the head, so around the sinuses, around the nasal cavity, mouth, ear, in the neck, axillae, in the abdominopelvic region, in our groin area, and so forth. And so what we're going to see is that the lymph will move in to the lymph node through the afferent vessel. Remember, the correct pronunciation here is really afferent, but sometimes it's hard to hear the difference. And so I do like to say afferent. And then the lymph will leave at the efferent or efferent vessel. So I always just remember efferent, E for exit. We see that we have blood vessels here serving each of our lymph nodes. And so this kind of indentation here where you have both the efferent vessel and the blood vessels is referred to as the hilum. As you look at this structure of the lymph node, we see that thick fibrous capsule on the outside, and then we see that it's extending into the interior, kind of making these little like walls or divisions inside the lymph node. And so we can talk about each of those as trabeculae. The AE ending indicates that it's plural. So trabecula. I've not spelled that one right. Would be the singular version. So let me go ahead and edit that as well. Okay, as we look at the organization of the lymph node, we are going to use our terms cortex and medulla that we've been using throughout the course. So remember that your cortex is your outermost tissue layer. And here we're going to see that this contains a lot of those B cells and then also germinal centers, where we're going to see production of new lymphocytes. And then the interior, so you can see the interior kind of designated by this dotted line. So the interior, remember, is your medulla. And the medulla then is containing the medulla then is the core of the lymph node, and it is containing your B cells again, and also macrophage. Remember, the macrophage is one of our most important phagocytes, and phagocytes are those first lines of cellular defense. We talked about our non-specific immunity, so they're going to be important in triggering, initiating an immune response. We have sort of this in-between area. So you have cortex as the outermost and medulla as the core, and then sort of kind of loosely in between, we have what's called the paracortex. And the paracortex is going to contain T cells. So remember, these are our important cytotoxic T cell lymphocytes. So as that lymph is moving through, it's coming across B cells, it's coming across T cells, it's coming across the macrophage. And so all that information that we learned in the lecture regarding specific immunity, we can start applying that information here. The last thing I want to do is we look at the lymphocyte, as we look at the lymph node, is just to go through the order of how the fluid moves, of how the lymph moves. So we start, of course, at the afferent vessel, and then the lymph is moving through the cortex, through the paracortex, through the medulla, and then exiting the efferent vessel. The last things for us to look at are the remaining organs. So here we're looking, of course, at the thoracic cavity. And so we can see our right lung with 3 lobes, and we can see our left lung, which is 2 lobes. And we have, of course, our heart right here. So what we're looking at right here is the thymus. Now the thymus does have a cortex. So again, that's going to be our outermost tissue, and the thymus does have a medulla, which would be the core, but we're not really able to label that information. Now the thymus is going to be where those T cells mature. And we see that the thymus also produces the hormones thymosines, which are important in T cell maturation. But the thing that we should be paying attention to is that the thymus has its maximum size at puberty. And we'll see at that point it's about 40 grams. And then as we get older, so after this time of puberty, we see that it's going to go through a period of decreasing in size. It's going to become both fibrous and fatty. And this process is called involution. So that by the time we get to around 50 years of age, 50 years old, it's going to weigh maybe less than 12 grams. And so one of the reasons that our immune responses do decline with age has to do with this involution that occurs with the thymus. But remember, those T cells that we're making are pretty much living with us throughout our lives. So most of the times we're coming across new pathogens in childhood and through puberty. And so we have essentially developed the immune response that we need as we move into adulthood. The last organ for us to take a look at here is the spleen. In this particular cut, notice we're doing a cross section right underneath the diaphragm. And so to give you your reference, this is the liver, here's the stomach, here's the pancreas, kidney, and so this is the spleen. Now the smooth surface of the spleen, that's going to be across close to the diaphragm, which is this large muscle that's the top of the thoracic, top of the abdominopelvic cavity, and also some of the back of the abdominopelvic cavity, is called the diaphragmatic surface. That's a C right there. We also have an entry point in the spleen where the blood vessels are penetrating, and we refer to that as the hilum, just like we've done on some previous. So over here on this image, we're looking directly at the hilum here. And then we would consider all of this view to be the visceral surface. So this is the part of the spleen that is up against our other organs, and so we can see some space in that organ for those to like nestle around those other organs. We have the splenic artery, and we have the splenic vein. Now, when we look at the cells of the spleen, we see what's referred to as the white pulp. And this is going to have a whole lot of white blood cells. So this is dominated by white blood cells. And then we have what's called the red pulp, which is going to have a higher concentration of red blood cells. And this is all that we're labeling for our lymphatic system. So as always, take care of yourselves and each other.